Previously, we talked about the purpose of the single start icon. We said this is really good if we just want to get some general information about how this sample is going to be handled in the machine. So we ran a cholesterol sample. Never ran a cholesterol sample before. I made it, I put it in solution, I put it on the machine. Maybe I've never ran it before and I need to know some information about it just to make sure that it works. So that's the purpose of the single start. So we saw the chromatogram show up on the screen. We saw one peak that got registered. I knew that there was only one component in that sample because I made it, and that lets me know, yes, sure enough, this machine found cholesterol, and it comes off at about 1 minute, a little less than 1 minute, but it comes off at about 1 minute. Okay, well, what if I've got 20 samples to inject? Or what if I have 5 samples to inject? I don't want to do single starts every time. That requires me to come over to the machine and key in all that information at one time, or one after another as they get finished. I want the machine to take care of it on its own. I don't want to worry with it. I want to set it and forget it. Okay, so what we do is that's the purpose of the batch processing tab that's here to the left. So I'm going to click the batch processing tab. And when I do that, my chromatogram disappears. My chromatogram doesn't really, though, disappear. It's still running. If you look down here at the bottom of the screen, you will see that this tab now that's open is called the batch table. If I want to go back to my chromatogram, the only thing that I have to do is click the data acquisition tab that's right here. So if I click that tab, there's my chromatogram. It didn't disappear. It didn't go into hiding. I know exactly where it's at. So I can toggle between these two tabs at the bottom as I need to if I want to look at this chromatogram. So batch table. Well, batch means just that. You've got a batch of samples you want to run. So what we do is that we've got to tell it how to save the data, what order to run the samples in, and we have to make all of those settings in the very beginning. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the proper kind of steps, and we're just going to run a couple of cholesterol standards that I have made. Not really a sample yet. If I had some samples made, I could put that into the system, but for now, we're just going to run some standards. Okay, so in the beginning, I always like to start off with a blank. So you should see at least line number 1 all the way across here, right? Okay, so tray name. Okay, that means it's tray number 1. But that's not really where the column starts. You've got to be careful. If you go down to the bottom and take a look at the toolbar, see this area here? There's other stuff over there that I need to pay attention to. And the very first column should be vial number. Okay, so vial number 1, tray name number 1. What did I put into that spot? Well, that is a blank. That's all that's there is a blank. So I'm going to type blank in. Sample ID, I leave that blank, right? This was on the simple start screen. When I just wanted to do the single run, these are the same blocks that are there. It's just in a nice Excel spreadsheet for me here because I'm running multiple things at one time. So sample name, sample ID, I can leave that blank. Sample type, leave this as unknown for your purposes. Okay, we're going to want you to go through and make your own calibration curves. We don't want you to get the machine to do that for you. We want you to do it on your own. So sample type I'm going to keep unknown here. If I click this box, there's an arrow. For those people that are maybe watching this and you're enrolled in one of our classes, there's an arrow here. If I click the arrow, this allows me to tell the instrument this is a standard, this is a control sample, this is a spot sample, this is an internal standard addition. It allows me to go through and make those changes. But for now, in the beginning, we want you to do your own cal curve. We don't want you to take advantage of the instrument for that. So click unknown. That's the only way that this report will work. The analysis type. Well, if I click this box, this by default will be IT and QT. If you click the drop down arrow, you can change those settings. The IT means quantitative and the QT means quantitative calculation. So do you want to do calculations with them? If so, click it. Do you want it to integrate under the peak, which means get the areas, how big the peaks are? If so, click it. By default, both of those should be chosen. The method file name, again, this is the same block that was there with the single start. I just want to make sure that the method is loaded, that's proper. So right now it says acetaminophen. I'm not running acetaminophen. That's another method that's been put into the system. I need to choose the right method. So I go into LCSolutions. I saved it in the Chemtechathon folder. And there's my method, cholesterol method. That's what I'm running. That's what I've saved. So I'll double click it. Data file. Data file again. That's the same thing that was in the single start. Well, right now I've got to tell it how I want it to save my data. So I'll click the cell. I click the arrow that's beside of it. I choose the proper folder, so LCSolutions. I want it to save in the Chemtechathon, and this is a blank area right now. So I want to name it something that I can remember, and again, I'm just going to name it blank. That's easy. And I hit open. So that saves and changes the information in that cell. Level number. These are for your calibration standards. We are not running things as standards. We're going to get you to do that on your own. So this should say 0. If this really was a standard, then this would be level 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, meaning standard 1, standard 2, standard 3, standard 4, and standard 5. Injection volume. How much of it do you want to inject? Well, this method that I've made up, I'm going to be injecting 10 microliters. Your lab experiment or your lab handout will tell you how much to inject, and that's where you'll make those changes. And then down here you will see another column that says report format file. There's so many different ways that we can report data on a sheet that we have different report files to choose from. This is like opening up maybe Publisher and choosing a pre-made template for you to start plugging in your data and for it to print out on a sheet of paper. So what I want to do is make sure that I have chosen the right report that I should be using for the instrument and for my analysis. So if I click the cell and I click the drop down arrow, again right now it's in caffeine. I don't want a caffeine report template. I'm not reporting caffeine. I'm going to go into LCSolutions. I'll go into the Chemtechathon folder, and you will see that we have a Chemtechathon report template. I'm going to double click it. That will print off data that I will need for the day of the competition or that hands-on laboratory practical when I come in to prove that I know how to use the instrument. That's the report template that I need to choose. Everything else is okay. You don't need to worry about the other columns. That's it. So this only has allowed me to enter in one. I now need to enter in my others. So in vial number 2, in tray number 1, I will have a cholesterol sample, and I'm going to say cholesterol 1 or cholesterol high because this was my high standard. Unknown, ITQT, the method file, again I'm going to go back and I'm going to choose the proper method. The data file, I have to go in, tell the machine where to save my data, and this is going to be cholesterol high. I hit open. Level is 0. I'm just running it straight. I'll do all the calculations myself after this is over. Injection volume, I'm going to change this to 10. I can also just key in 10 there. Report format file, find my folder. Again, this is LCSolutions, Chemtechathon. There it is, report template. And report output means, do you want it to print off the data as you go? You can hit no here. You don't need those checked because we're not really finished with what we need yet. Okay? So then I'm going to go through and I'm going to enter in my others. I know, be patient, right? This is kind of boring, but this is what happens every day in a lab. I don't know about you, but I would be rather messing in the lab than working with this horrible spreadsheet software program. Okay, so I'm choosing my method file. The data file, again, I've got to tell it where to go. And this is my cholesterol middle, because this one I've named high. I've ran 3. I've made 3. A high, a middle, and a low. And then here, I'm going to go back, and I'm going to choose the report template again. And then I've got one more to enter in. File number 4. This is my cholesterol low. So again, I've made 3 standards. Let's spell that right, Tracy. A quick shortcut here. Notice I kept going in and I kept clicking the arrow and going through and changing. Once I do one of these, I can actually click that box and just drag down. Right click on the screen and put fill down. And it will fill down all of the others that you want to assign to that method. That only works with method file though, right? The data file, most of the time the data files are very particular. I just really want to put some extra care in how I name those, so that way I don't have any confusion when I begin to analyze these samples. So I do want to manually do that each time. Injection volume's the same way. I can kind of click the cell, drag down however many I want. It can be 14 or 15 of them, and just fill down it there as well. Report format file, I can do that one the same way. So click it. All of the other samples that are down below, I just highlight them. I right click, do fill down, and that assigns the same report template for every one. It saves me a little bit of work. Okay, so I'm going to run 4 samples: a blank, cholesterol high, cholesterol middle, and cholesterol low. And now I need to tell the machine, these are my 4 samples. These are the locations. This is how I want you to save them. It's okay with all of that. I'm now going to hit batch start over to the side. Notice it doesn't say single start anymore. It's now a batch because there's more than one. Before you do that though, I always just like to go up here to the top and click on row number 1 and highlight it, because it really likes when you do that. It makes it feel better about where to start in the batch table. So if I click row number 1, that row is highlighted, and now I can go down and I can hit batch start. And it says, okay, you want to do the batch start. Do you want to do every line, or do you want to do just certain lines from this point on? This is kind of like a confirmation screen. And I want to do all lines, every single one of them. All of the ones that I have entered into that table, I want you to analyze all 4. So I'll click all lines, and now I hit start. Then it says, okay, we're going to save this information to what we call a batch table. Is that okay? And I hit okay. That's fine with me. Not a problem. And now the machine is going to go through what it normally would go through if it was single starting. So right now it's went over to pre-treatment. It's rinsing the needles. Once it rinses the needles, it will inject the samples just like the single start did. And then once the 5 minutes is up, it stops, because again, 5 minutes is where I've told it to stop it. And then it will go and rinse the needle for a second time, and then it will inject my second sample. And I can keep track of the progress of the machine up here at the very top of the screen. Notice when I hit batch start, a new piece or toolbar came up here at the very top. Well, if I drag that down a little bit, I can kind of see the row that this machine is working on right now. So it's telling me It's injecting number 1. It's running number 1. And it's not made it to row 2, 3, or 4 yet. So we're going to give it 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. And we're going to allow it to inject everything that it needs to inject. And then I will show you, once that last sample is ran, what our next step will be with the software.